everyone, and welcome again to the Next Level Podcast. My name's Carm, and I've been burning the candle at both ends, and I love it. Joined as always by my lovely, intelligent co-host, FFXI. How's it going?
What is that supposed to mean?
It's basically like a thought of you're just dying inside and using energy that you don't have and running the tank. I mean, if you burn a candle from both sides, it's going to come to the middle faster and you're not going to have any candle left.
I guess I've just never heard that phrase before.
I'm not that old.
Are you sure? I mean,
I mean, I didn't think I was that old, but now I'm starting to feel it.
I can't do the /comfort motion while sitting in a chair. It doesn't allow me to. I'm sorry.
Death, you are crude crail. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Crude something.
But I've been
Yes.
doing I've been doing well. It's been an interesting week. Haven't really done much in the game because I know you've been busy, so I've been helping Link Shell members get random clears in Odyssey while you've been out. But other than that, like, haven't really done a whole lot. Well, actually, I changed that. I did get my sphere progress to 75% out of 100, so I am
But
almost
you're at
there.
76.
No, I'm at 75. It might be
I thought
76. I don't know. I might be going crazy. I know I need to go farm some reverberation spheres because they're
if
really
I
high
was
in price.
doing that shield, I would be going crazy.
This is why I've been doing it in spurts.
I'm going crazy enough doing all the things to get my Masa leveled up, so that's what I've been doing in my free time is doing that. But I mean, like you said, helping people in the link shell, and even when I'm doing these Masa trials and stuff, it's been cool to just meet random people and team up with random people. It's been kind of uplifting to see the community actually like want to play. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, Mur and I have been working on Kaldabog trials, and we had a couple people team up with us. So it was a lot of Masa users towards the end because we didn't see a lot of Kaldabog users in the beginning. So once we got to like the Shahagan and anything onwards, a lot of Masa users were teaming up with us.
Yeah, I teamed up with someone on the Saga, and I teamed up with someone on. I don't remember what the one after it was. Drawing a blank, but I've teamed up with a couple people on a couple different NMs, and it's been kind of nice. Also, just like again, how fun it's been to just meet all these people in the link shell, and like it's just been a fun experience. It's not like we went out hunting people. We didn't search for these people. We didn't start yelling to join our link shell. We didn't start putting all our link pearls in the concierge and all this stuff. Like we've never done that. We just somehow gathered these really cool people, and we've had like full alliances doing Dynamis and Omen and stuff like that, and it's just been a fun experience. I mean, yeah, it's not the current content and stuff like that, but it's just been a joy to play the game with a lot of different people.
Yeah, I know I've done a couple Odyssey runs, like I said before, where when you've been out, since we're usually in a static together, and just even going and farming shoal bees with them has been really fun and just been a learning experience because sometimes they'll want to try different jobs out and do different combos. So Mer and I have just filled whatever we've needed. And sometimes they've gone really well and sometimes they haven't gone so well, but we all just laugh about it and try again next time. Or then we do one of the boss runs and then that goes extremely well, like been able to get the procs done and everything with no issues.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to just build a solid group, even if they don't have the best gear or everything out there that can be got per se as far as gear goes. But as we've gone through Dynamis, as we've gone through Omen, we're explaining less, we're talking about less mechanics. It's just like, and people are calling it out. Like even hearing all the different people say, "Hey, someone's on the ninja," or "Hey, make sure the ninja doesn't blow up," or "The avatar's awake," or stuff like that. They're just noticing these things that we've called out over time, and everybody's kind of learning, and they're paying attention to what's going on, not just like, "Oh, let's have somebody carry us through this event." It's been a good experience.
Yeah, and they've even gone out, like we've talked about before, and doing content just within each other. They're not waiting for like you or I to be available just to go do something. They've been going out on their own. They've been doing a lot of odysseys by themselves. It's just on those days when they don't have anybody else to go with and they're asking in the link shell that, hey, I'm going to go do this. Does anybody want to join? It's really cool to see that happening.
Yeah, we seem to have gathered a lot of people that not so much like don't need the help, but they're willing to help themselves, and we're able to sit here and be able to help them help themselves. So it's been like I said, a really fun experience. Um, I'm really just happy with the group we have right now. I look forward to events. I look forward to doing these things, and it's just like it's made the game a lot more fun than just doing Odyssey every night.
Yeah, and with some of them being newer returning players, they've been asking us questions about different gear and how they can utilize it in different sets that they have, which has been a nice thing to also go through with them and be like, hey, you could use this to maximize this particular part of your job, or you can use this as a way to at least get your job started so that way it's efficient in this one particular thing until they're able to build more gear up in regards to it as well.
Well, what do you know? That's kind of what our topic is today, isn't it?
Just
It's like you
maybe.
did this on purpose.
I try here every once in a while.
Yeah, I think that there might have been a little bit of purposely upbuilding there.
No, not at all. Not at all. Because it is actually true. I mean, we've had some people that have been talking about equip sets in Final Fantasy 11 with the actual mechanics and that, and some of them are talking about gear swap that are using Windower. So it's kind of been something just going on throughout our experience with these new and returning players.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of brings us to what we did want to talk about today, and that's different gear sets, how to build them, the direction we think about when we build our own gear sets, because I know even you, me, and Mur all build gear sets a little bit differently.
Yeah, especially Mur. Mur definitely thinks outside the box. Who's
I
like,
think
this
Mur
job does
invented the
this.
box.
No, he invented being outside the box.
Yeah, he invented the box and then jumped out of it.
Yeah. Which there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually been
Oh,
making our runs really fun because it's like, oh, well, we could take this one job that's really good at doing this, but they do have the option to do this, and we need that particular thing to do this other thing. So let's just try shoving this job into that one thing. And sometimes it's worked out perfectly for us, and sometimes it's been like, oh, we should probably never do that again.
yeah, it's always an adventure to see what's going to happen, but that's the fun of this game. Like, it's a game where you can do so many different things. You don't have to just be a cookie cutter build. There isn't just like one gear set that you level into and that's now the best gear set, and you just never worry about everybody anything else and everybody does the same thing. I mean, there's probably not another paladin in this game that plays paladin the exact same way as me or has the exact same gear sets as me. Uh, you just the game has so much options and ways you can play to change up your style and to feel like you're actually controlling the flow of the fight.
Well, also, I know one of the things that we've been hearing from a bunch of new and returning players is that there's not a lot of job guides that are up to date or are so out of date that doesn't even have any eye level gear in the actual guide itself. And people are just like, I'm not sure what to do with it. and just learning the different things to look for when building sets or when you're looking at like a particular weapon skill or a particular spell, like key things to kind of see and then build with newer gear that you see is coming out. I mean, I do a lot of gear searching on both wiki because I could see the augments or on auction house as well too.
Yeah, that's, I mean, you kind of nailed it right there on the head, even though the gear is kind of outdated on some of the guides that are up there. It's really about just going through and looking at what these people are thinking about and then seeing, okay, are they on the right path? Do we think they're on the right path? Am I going a different path entirely? And just having another idea, because I look at paladin guides all the time. And a lot of them I'm kind of like, I don't think I do that. Others I'm like, okay, I can see where you were thinking here. Or, hey, that's a cool idea. I didn't know about that one piece that I could maybe move something around and tweak something else in my own personal gear set. So as long as the guides are being used as, hey, I'm going to read this guide, it's going to give me an idea of maybe a way I can utilize some of this stuff, because every piece of gear in this game, well, maybe not every piece, but most of the pieces of gear in this game can be utilized in some sort or fashion.
Yeah, because there's definitely been times where I've talked to people who I've ended up giving my Luas for gear swap wise, and I've given it to them, and they're just like, "Oh, I'm just gonna wait till I get the same gear that you have," and I'm like, "Well, that's cool. You're not really helping yourself because you might actually have gear that can help you in this current moment that you're not utilizing that could make your job better until you build up to the better, or not, I shouldn't say better gear, but more of the upgraded pieces."
Yeah, and I've even noticed a couple times when I've shared my Lua that, I mean, even sometimes it's outdated my own just because I don't pay attention to every single set in my Lua constantly. And sometimes I'll pick up a new piece and it'll be like, oh, hey, I could have thrown that in there. I could have done this with that. So there's never one guide that's going to be like, this is the only way to do things. There's just never going to be that guide. There's never going to be that instance where one place has everything that could possibly happen.
And also with different mechanics changing in the game. I mean, it doesn't happen as frequently as it was when they were updating a lot of jobs, but it still does happen. And I know when I was working on my Warrior Lua a while back, I was looking up a bunch of different weapon skill guides. Just from either any jobs, really. I've looked up a couple of Dark Knight guides, Warrior guides, just to see what people were saying was really good gear for it. And then I was like, okay. And I built those sets. And then I went out and I even tested those sets and then went, I feel like I could do more damage with this, and then tweaked it by changing out pieces, just from knowing what the weapon skill has from looking at BG Wiki on this specific weapon skill itself and gone, maybe this would help better than what this person was using. And sometimes I was right and sometimes I was horribly wrong, and then went, okay, I'm going to switch back some of these pieces. But being able to even find areas to test out your own equipment just to see if it truly is working as intended, essentially.
Yeah, it's all about just figuring out what works best with the combination that you have, because you may not have the exact same combination as somebody else, or you may have a better combination. So it's about taking the ideas and then molding them into something else. Like, okay, cool, you've got this idea. Let me see how I can use that idea and kind of mess with it on my own.
Yeah, like if we're talking about mages, one of the things that I always hear a lot of people say is like, "Oh, my spells are casting really slow." And it's like, "Okay, well we can take a look at fast cast." And some of the minimum things that you can look at for fast cast is just getting up to the 80% reduction with just fast cast gear itself. And some people are just like, "Oh, well do I need haste in there? What about quick magic?" And it's like that's something else that you can think about. While yes, haste doesn't affect actual casting speed, it's something to think about for potential recastability, for certain spells, but that's a whole totally different thing. And then you also have quick magic. So with red mages in particular, where it's built into their job, both fast cast and quick magic, it's something that you can think about in your particular builds, but just like in the beginning, just leaning towards fast cast and just making sure you're getting to that 80% cap before thinking about quick magic sort of thing.
Yeah, it's all about your priorities of what your gear set is supposed to be doing. Like if you have a tanking set, your top priority should be making sure you hit the DT cap. Like that's just the way it is. And then you throw HP and enmity and all those magic evasion, magic defense bonus, all those other things in there. So it's just checking things off the list. Like where are your priorities? What are you making sure you're hitting? And then what can you add into the other places where you don't need the main priority?
Well, so that's a question that comes up a whole lot, not just even for tanking for DT, but just for any melee jobs or any mage jobs in DT. And we always get the question about if damage taken uh, is a separate calculation to physical damage taken and magic damage taken, and it's not. It's considered in the total, but it does combined in both categories for physical and magical. So you can use it to count towards your 50% cap in either side.
Right, and then you also get to factor in whether or not you have shell and things like that. So most times you're going to be able to rely on that shell 5 for that extra, I believe it's 29% DT.
For shell 5,
Yeah.
it is 29, yeah.
Okay, I thought I was remembering that correctly when I make all these freaking gear sets, but yeah, so it those are things you can think about. I mean, that's an extra 29% that doesn't have to be straight DT. You can put PDT like on your ambuscade cape instead of the 5% DT. There's all these different ideas that you can throw into these gear sets and different stipulations. And that's when you can also make different gear sets for different situations of maybe once again I go back to tanking a lot. I have tanking sets where I know that I'm going to get dispelled and I can't rely on having shell 5. So I throw in the extra DT stuff to make sure that my magic damage taken is always capped with or without shell 5.
Most definitely. And there's some people that are like, well, what if I can't hit the 50% DT cap overall? And it's like, you can make individual builds and just switch between them if you know you're fighting something that's more physical based or something that's more magic based. So that way you'll have that option of getting closer to the cap by prioritizing putting a build together of more physical damage taken or more magic damage taken, depending on what you're fighting. And that's something you can eventually work up towards to where you only need one set to be able to cover both. But just in case in those scenarios, it is okay to have two different sets.
Yeah, and it always isn't. It's not always completely necessary to 100% cap your DT. And I am a big fan of always making sure that my DT is capped, but as I've started to play more DD jobs, I kind of understand more the struggle of making sure your store TP is on there, making sure your haste is capped, making sure you're TPing as fast as possible while still making sure you don't explode. So it's one of these. It's probably the biggest struggle in the game is maximizing every set to make sure that you are doing the optimal amount of what your job needs to be doing, whether it's reducing damage, doing damage, healing, whatever you're doing, you need to make sure that you're doing the maximum of it. And that's probably the most fun part of this game for me.
Yeah, because speaking of TP sets for DD classes, like you mentioned, the needing haste. I mean, haste caps at 25.6, I believe. So you need to kind of go over that 25% just to make sure that you are at that haste cap, but it can fluctuate if you really do need haste in your equipment based off of job ability haste or delay minus, or if you're getting magic haste as well too. So in the beginning, it is okay to prioritize having capped haste at 26% in gear until you eventually learn, oh, maybe I don't need as much haste because I have a wyvern that's giving me haste on my weapon, so I don't really need it, sort of thing.
Or you have a bard that's giving you the 43.5 magic haste. Probably should have wrote all these factors down, but that would have made too much sense.
You're just
But
like, I can't remember all the numbers.
there's all these different factors, and I mean, Gear Swap's got a lot of cool things to it as well. But the game also kind of tells you, or you can know just by seeing what buffs you have and seeing, oh, I have haste 2, so that's 30%, or I have haste 1 from a white mage, that's 15%, or my bard's singing 2 haste songs, so as long as they're either marcadoed or they have +8 to march, then I'm good in the clear for magic ability or magic haste. And then you can find your job ability haste from different jobs like Hasso or Last Resort, or like you said, the Wyvern, things like that. So you can add all these things up and get to where you want to be, so you're maximizing your attack speed and your delay.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's even different properties when you're calculating dual wield, those dual wield jobs, it really throws a wrench in there because, like on Dancer, you do have that job ability haste from Haste Samba, but your dual wield will also fluctuate and change, which then your gear haste can fluctuate and change. And I know dual wield is one of those most annoying factors to try to calculate because if you have too much dual wield on or too much weapon delay minus, it actually has a negative impact to your equipment or to your TP gain, not really necessarily your equipment, to where you'll still be swinging just as fast because you've already hit that attack delay minus essentially, but you're gaining less TP because the game's trying to calculate it as if it was already including that dual wield. So that's one of those balances that you have to kind of see, and you start seeing dancers or even sub dancers using Hey Samba less because they're realizing it is having that negative impact on their TP gain.
Yeah, just like ninjas when they're building their TP sets and stuff, we don't want dual wield just because with all our job traits, we're only one dual wield shy of being capped. And then it's like anything over, you're not going to find a piece that has one dual wield on it. I know that we've made jokes in the past about things with one of something on it, and there will be a time when this is useful or something, but there's not a piece right now that I know of with one dual wield that is worth using for ninjas. So we just sit that one dual wield under the cap because anything over would be, like you said, more negative than it would be positive.
Yeah, I know there's a dual wield cheat sheet on BG Wiki that people can look up and they can see what their dual wield would be with capped magic haste or if they are sub dancer. Sadly, it doesn't have it for main dancers that have the merits in there, but you can kind of see what it would be based off of the percentage that you gain. But it does at least give you an idea. It's like, oh, I have a tier 3 dual wield build and I have capped haste. Well, I need 11. And a lot of people are like, oh, should I go above that 11? And it's like, no, dual wield's one of those things where actually being lower than the number is better than being higher than the number.
But I mean, even I know that a lot of people build idle sets a lot differently. And like just talking about idle sets in general, for me, I'm always trying to cap DT in my idle sets, cap resist, cap things like that, and then I start trying to throw in regen or refresh or things like that. Because yes, there are times when you can stand in an idle set and stand out of the way, but I would be that person that forgets to toggle my idle set and just sits there in all like straight regen or refresh gear, and then all of a sudden I just explode. So I typically try to set my idle sets more to the DT cap, but that's just me personally. Like if you're one of those people that can actually know when you're in danger and know when you need to throw on a DT set and you're idle, then more power to you.
Yeah, I know you and I have different white mage builds, and like you said, it's one of those things where I typically stand further away from the group when I'm actually healing on White Mage, which some people have probably noticed in our videos when they watch. And I'm actually on a healer class. And when I build my character, I do typically build it more for the refresh, like you were saying, you try to stray away from a little bit just to have the DT. But in the pieces that I don't have refresh on, I do lean more towards magic because there are some mobs where their AoE spells are pretty large, or they'll turn because I pulled maybe some hate at some point because of hate resets, and it'll cast magic at me first before running at me. So needing that high magic evasion, magic defense bonus, or magic damage taken minus, which I don't need a whole lot since I typically have Shell 5 up as being a white mage, but that's what I prioritize towards. And yes, it does have more resist silence because that's one of the scariest things for white mages to have. I mean, there are echo drops. So the other thing I would lean towards is the resist petrify, which some people make fun of the waist I wear, but I mean, I'm like, it's got resist petrify on it. It's so nice when it procs and I don't get petrified.
You know what else has resist petrify on it?
What?
The Schneidic ring.
No, that ring's not good.
Oh, it's great. The ring is great. I love it. I think it's just such a fantastic ring.
Well, there are
But
different opinions, but it is also different because I do a lot of crafting and usually play more melee jobs at this point, so using the other ones more of a priority to me than a movement speed and semi resists on it.
yeah, I mean that's fair. And like you said, everybody plays a little bit differently. Even on my white mage, I will say I do have 2 idle sets built. One that is more refresh and focused, and one that is more DT focused.
Yeah,
If I know I'm going to be in the range of something, I'll use the one that's more DT focused. But if I know that I'm going to be safe, then I can just do that. But that's like white mage where I have a little bit more leeway and I'm in my idle sets more often. For jobs like samurai or paladin, I'm not in an idle set that much unless I'm super tanking on paladin. So I guess that was a really terrible reference, but
or
jobs like
kiting.
samurai or ninja or something like that, where I'm typically engaged, it's more focused on my hybrid and my engaged sets, not so much my idle set.
Yeah, I'm definitely never underestimating the content, especially with newer content coming out. Sometimes you want to have like maybe a full DT set, then you're like, oh, okay, maybe it's not as high damaging as I thought it was, and you switch over to a hybrid set, like you were talking about, where you have more DD potential, but you're still being on the safe side. And then you can kind of see really which things are more painful to be up against, especially if you do or don't have a tank. Because if you have a tank that you know is going to be holding it as much as possible, you might be able to get out of even a hybrid set and just go full on damage until eventually it turns and looks at you, and then you're just got to quickly hit your button very fast so it doesn't smack you in the face.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. I completely lost my train of thought by sitting there doing what I was doing. Oh my gosh. My brain is just, it's actually melting right now.
Good job. Good job.
But also going into different tiers and different gear sets, there's the people that sit there and build like high accuracy sets and lower accuracy sets and things like that. So that when you get up against a big thief mob or your accuracy, the cap for accuracy is a lot higher and you're missing, you have that other set to fall back on, and you're like, okay, well, cool, this works.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people when they're working on their TP sets and thinking of accuracy, I know the number 1200 usually comes around, that people like to look in that sweet spot. And there is an actual thing in the game that you can use to check your parameters in regards to your attack and accuracy that a lot of people don't know about. And it's literally just slash check param. You can either do the auto translate function, it will pop it up, and then space, and then in um, it's not brackets, but it's little carrots. You could do me, or you could type your character's name out, and then it'll pull up your parameters in regards to your attack, your accuracy. It'll even pull up ranged attack and ranged accuracy as well too, so that way you could see, hey, how much accuracy do I have in this particular set that I am wearing, in order to feel like if you need to adjust it or increase it. If you do eat food, it will add it to that check param as well too. So you could be like, okay, even after I eat this particular food, what does my accuracy sit at? So that can help you determine whether you need more, less, or just to have a completely different set, like Carm was saying, to have that either a smidge higher accuracy or a very high accuracy build.
Yeah, just going through all your sets and figuring out one of the big kind of bugaboos about tanking anymore is your midcast sets. Some people have either midcast sets that aren't DT capped, or they aren't spell interrupt capped, or things like that, and all of a sudden you just get blown up because you switch to a midcast. Not only should you be timing your spells so that if you're single target tanking, then there's no reason to ever get interrupted on a spell. You can just use full enmity or stuff like that. But when you're kiting big groups or you're tanking big groups, you need that spell interrupt. And you also need to make sure that your midcasts are still DT caps, so that even when you're swapping and you're doing stuff to add more enmity and other things like that into your gear, or for curing on paladin, you still have that cure potency, but you're also not exploding.
Yeah, that's also a good point, because there's different things for cures as well too. I mean, you got cure potency 1 that caps at 50%, you have cure potency 2 that caps at 30%, and then you also have cure potency received for people like paladins that can actually put it on for when they're curing themselves. And that caps at 30% as well too, if I remember correctly.
That's correct, yeah.
And so that's a whole nother combination when you're talking about paladins trying to build cure sets. I don't think they have access to any cure potency 2 other than the Najee's loop, in regards to things they can wear. But
Yeah,
that's
but you
another.
get it 25% from Majesty.
Oh, that's true. I did forget that Majesty gives that as well too. So I mean, that's something to think about. But in regards to like newer mages, one of the things they can think about is just looking at trying to get cure potency 1 capped, because that'll definitely help their cures exponentially, rather than trying to piece together different sets for to incorporate cure potency 2 when maybe something has more cure potency 1 that would help them more beneficial. I know some people also look at the day and weather. For newer players, I would not really stress about the day weather bonuses, just because you really do want to try to hit those caps first and then look at those additional options. But they are there, for people that actually do have either gear swaps that can recognize it so they can look at it a little bit more, or if they do have an equip set that they have a separate macro button for that just says if it's day or weather, they can click on. But again, I wouldn't stress too much with that in the very beginning.
Yeah, one of the cool things though that there's out now, like you were saying, easy ways to hit that cure potency cap is the Sirota belt. Yeah, it adds some extra MP to your cure. I don't know how I'd have to get it and actually play around with it to see how I'd put it into my paladin set, but I know people have been thinking about it and trying it out on RuneSub Scholar, and just kind of giving that extra option with a session with things like that, of having that high cure and having that high cure potency, and kind of bridging the gap to where Majesty was this huge thing for paladins, and then rune fencers kind of were like, okay, well, we keep hate really well, but they don't have all the utility that a paladin does when it comes to Majesty. So it's just another idea and another way you can utilize gear sets to bridge different gaps that are missing in your party. Because I mean, Majesty, it's invaluable at times. Like I know in Dynamis, I'm able to cure like every single party on Paladin, and it's insane. Like it's insanely valuable. It's really helpful. It can help the healers be able to just worry about status effects, help the party just have to worry about other things. Then, oh crap, I have to cure a party. But okay, the paladin just did it for me, and they're still keeping hate. So
Yeah, and I actually had a question since we're talking about some of the Amantrove specific rewards. The Menelaus ring always came up as a question to me because of the Kursna plus 20. And some people are like, is it worth losing 10% fast cast in a Kursna build? And I always tell them, you are able to actually lose some of the fast cast because, in regards to recast, it's only half of what's going to be on that piece. So you're only losing 5% of your recast ability. But with Kursna, you can actually mess with your set enough that you can have the recast still come up to where you could use it again before your hand even comes down, where it allows you to cast the spell again. So you can find that balance of when do I need fast cast or haste in order to have my recast low enough to where I can just spam the spell over and over again, in order to be more efficient in a party. So don't be worried about certain equipment having negative effects in regards to what you're casting because they may be more beneficial. I mean, I have a haste plus 10 curing cape from Ambuscade, which a lot of people look at me funny for, but I was staring at my cure build and I realized that I wasn't capped in haste, which was actually causing my cures to have a longer recast timer. So that's one of those things where I made the cape anyway, didn't need the cure potency on it, but it was nice to have haste there in order to be able to dish out more cures at a more faster rate to take care of a party, especially in certain situations where you're the only white mage in a full alliance and you need to help out all the different parties.
yeah, that's actually a really interesting point. I hadn't really thought of that. And I mean, but like you said, or like we've been saying, there's so many other things to think about. Like you think about a cure build, what your priorities are. You want to cap cure potency. You want to cap cure potency 2 as much as you can. You want to do minus enmity. You want to throw conserve MP in there. Like, I think all of those cross my mind before I think about haste. And then, but then, as you were saying, sometimes you need that spell back quicker. So there's all these different things going on with the gear sets.
Yeah, and with White Mage in regards to the Conserve MP, you don't quite need it as much because you have your Empyrean legs that really do help you with basically conserving your own MP because you gain so much back. So you can lose some of those pieces in order to help have it either be faster or just more efficient. But for other jobs like Red Mage and Scholar, where they don't have that benefit of that piece, they do need to look at those other options, which is why even though you might have a single ability that is amongst many different classes, it may be built different ways just to make it more efficient for that class itself.
Yeah, absolutely. But then there's even more things when you start getting into weapon skills and stuff like that. Like this rabbit hole goes on for a while.
Yeah, weapon skills in particular are very interesting because you get a lot of people that are like, when is weapon skill damage more efficient than multi attack? And when is TP bonus more efficient than any of the other things or stats? And that really comes down to reviewing what the weapon skill is based around, what the modifiers are actually entailing. So looking at Final Fantasy, looking at BG Wiki and pulling up those different weapon skills, they might give you clues in the notes. You might just have to look and or ask questions. I mean, we can talk about some of the key things that we can look about in weapon skills in order to determine which kind of route to lean towards. But there's never really one thing that can really determine a weapon skill. And that's where I was saying earlier in this episode when I was on Warrior, I went out and tested things out and find out things were better that I had changed, whether it was adding more stats or going more multi attack or more weapon skill damage, or just completely throwing a 180 and being like, oh, I was building this for weapon skill damage, but then I went multi attack and it was way better, or I switched over and it was terrible idea. So it's kind of those things where we could show you. I mean, we can't really show you because you only get to look at our faces. I'm sorry. I could try posting some of these weapon skills in the videos on YouTube. But for those listening through the actual podcast stations, I'm sorry you're not going to see it, but we'll try to paint the picture as we're talking about them.
I mean, yeah, even when you're thinking about the different weapon skills, like we've been saying, it's not always just about what gear is best or what the perfect way to use a weapon skill is. It's about what you have available to you and how you can apply it. So, like when you're going through guides, when you're going and looking up different weapon skills and what the modifiers are and things like that, it's supposed to give you an idea of say, okay, well, this is what other people are building for. Let's try that. Let's try, okay, like you said, prioritizing weapon skill damage. So let's put all the pieces that I have that do weapon skill damage and prioritize that and see how it works. Okay, maybe that didn't work as well as I thought. Maybe I can throw a bunch of double attack and multi attack and triple attack and try to do it that way. Okay, that worked better. It's finding out what you have available to you, testing it out, and figuring out where you're going to get the more consistent results. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the game is about consistency. Just because, yeah, you can spike straight nines every now and then, but if your average weapon skill is like 25k and every once in a while you get like a random quad attack and you hit straight nines and you feel really great about yourself, but you could also be averaging 40k if you put straight weapon skill damage on it, you're going to do more over time with just straight averaging 40k.
And one of the key things that we could look at, some examples, like if we have Savage Blade pulled up, you could see that it's a physical based weapon skill. So you don't want any magic accuracy or magic attack bonus in regards to that. But then you might go over to Cataclysm, which is a pure magic based weapon skill. So having physical attack and physical accuracy won't really help you, and you need to put in more magic accuracy or magic attack bonus. Or we could do Karm's new favorite weapon skill and do Tachi Jinpu, which is a hybrid weapon skill, which has completely different aspects than the first original two.
Hybrids are so good. Oh, they're so good. Hybrid weapon skills are just so fun. And the addition of Nyame has not only done a lot for hybrid weapon skills, it's done a lot for a lot of the weapon skills. I mean, Nyame having multi-attack weapon skill damage and skill chain bonus all together on it is just insane. Pardon me.
But it still may not be the best all piece for certain weapon skills at the same time. And if you're a new or returning player and you're getting the base Naomi set and you don't have any of the augments, you might have other pieces that do beat it out as well too.
Yeah, and most jobs have at least a couple pieces of their JSE equipment where there's a weapon skill damage, where there's multi-attack, where there's all this stuff. So you can put these into your different builds.
For sure. And then there's also the TP bonus gear that we talked about earlier. I know I had some people that were like, "Oh, I just throw this into every weapon skill because FTP, like basically making it to where I have higher TP when I weapon skill means that my weapon skills will always do more damage." And it's like, yeah, but not as much as you think sometimes. And that's another one where, like, if we bring back again Savage Blade, which is a really recommended weapon skill that a lot of people use, it is a damage varies with TP type weapon skill. But why FTP is so needed in those TP bonus weapons, like the gun for Corsair that they can use from Trial of Magian, or the earring reward that you can get from Wings of the Goddess, does have a more beneficial property because the TP modifiers jump so much more. And so that'd be okay, if I put this on, I can have a higher weapon skill frequency because I'm technically weapon scaling at a lower TP when I actually gain it, but with these TP bonus equipment, it does put me up higher. So with Corsairs, for example, if you have the TP bonus gun, that gives you an additional 1,000 TP. And then if you have the Wings of the Goddess earring, it gives you an additional 250. That means you could weapon skill your Savage Blades at 1750 and still get the same output as if it was a 3000 TP weapon skill. So that's pretty huge instead of having to wait until you reach up to a certain point to be able to use the higher damaging modifiers.
Yeah, and it's also, but with those TP bonus gears, not so much the gun for Corsair because there's not really a penalty for using that besides not having a strong range weapon on. But a lot of the TP bonus weapons, like the dagger, like the katana, like the sword, things like that, they're lacking a lot of the accuracy that normal eye level gear is going to have. So you have to make up for that in your gear sets, and that's one of the questions that you have to ask yourself when you're building these gear sets is, if I use this weapon, if I use this piece of gear, where do I make up for the lack, or where do I make up for, or what can I else can I do to either better accent this or to make up for the fact that I just lost a bunch of accuracy.
Yeah, but there are also weapon skills where they may not have that damage varies with TP as their primary use of damage. They may be like Circle Blade, where if you just have higher TP, it just increases the range in which your area of effect weapon skill hits. So, having more TP may not be more beneficial. So you may not need those TP bonus equipment on at all if you're going to be using those specific weapon skills. So that's where you need to kind of see, where does your weapon skill lie in regards to if it utilizes an FTP modifier or if it uses it for a different reason. Sujin Spiral is another one where it has a FTP modifier that produces plague on a monster, but the FTP modifier doesn't. All it does is it increases the chance of plague actually landing instead of like making it last longer, like full break sort of thing. So that's where you can kind of do a balance of, do I really need to use this piece on this particular weapon skill or not?
Yeah, and talking about things like Savage Blade and talking about FTP, I mean, you kind of broke it down to where you're like, okay, yeah, the boost is really big, but to kind of put it in perspective and actually put a number to where how big it is, if you weapon skill with Savage Blade and you only have 1,000 TP, you're only getting a 4.0 FTP modifier. At 2,000 TP, it more than doubles. It's almost like almost one and almost two and a half. Like it's a 10.25 FTP modifier. Like that's a huge jump in damage just for saving an extra 1k TP. So it's like you're sitting at 1k and you can do, if you're always weapon skilling at 1k, you're going to do an FTP4 Savage Blade and an FTP4 Savage Blade. If you save to 2k, you can do one at 10.25 FTP. So you really get rewarded by looking at these different things and figuring out when you should use your weapon skills. And of course, if you're skill chaining, then you're just trying to make the skill chain go off. But even then, you want to be ready for the FTP that you want to be at. A lot of samurai weapon skills. I'm looking at Tachi Fudo right now. You said at 3.75 for 1,000 TP, 5.75 for 2,000 TP, and 8 for 3,000. It's not as big of a jump as Savage Blade is, but wherever you're at in that skill chain, you want to be able to time it right and build enough TP so that you're hitting harder so that your skill chain does more.
Yeah, and there's still at least a pretty decent jump in Tachi Fudo. I mean, there are some damage varies with TP weapon skills. One being like spinning axe for warriors with a single wield axe, which only goes from 1,000 of 2.0 to 3,000 of 3.0. So it has a very marginal difference when using it at 1,000 versus 3,000. So you may be more beneficial to using either weapon skill damage or multi attack damage in this one instead of TP bonus.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about what you're prioritizing, what you're deciding is the best way to go about it. And again, it's what you have available. you may have a slew of TP bonus available, and you don't have enough weapon skill damage um, pieces of gear to actually utilize it to the point where it does more than your than your extra TP stuff. So again, it's just figuring out what works best for your gear sets by testing it out or by going out and figuring out things for yourself.
So, Carm, what if somebody has the Phodia pieces? There's a Phodia Gorget and a Phodia belt that give you weapon skill or basically FTP modifiers.
Um, Typically, from my understanding, it's when you want to look for FTP replicating on multi hits, like when FTP is replicating through each hit. That's from my understanding. I'm still learning all this DD stuff, though.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I can kind of explain it a little bit better. You will see in certain weapon skills that some people have noted if FTP is transferred across all hits, so you do get that modifier on every single attack of a weapon skill. One of them I can think of is Resolution, which is a 5-hit weapon skill, but FTP does go across all hits. Versus we have, I think, double checking, make sure before I speak out of line. Um, Savage Blade does not have that FTP across all hits. So it has 2 hits, but it doesn't go across all of them. So most of that FTP modifier is applied only to that first hit versus 2. And with in regards to resolution, it does it on all 5. But what the Phodia pieces actually do is it gives you a 0.1 to your FTP modifier. So it's a 10% boost to your FTP. So if you're looking at the FTP modifiers on BG Wiki on the specific weapon skill that you're looking for, it's going to add a 0.1 depending on if you're using the necklace or the belt separately, or if you're using them together, it'll give you 0.2.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually really interesting. I mean, that's one of the things that I know I've always questioned when I'm working on weapon skill sets and stuff like that is like when the phodia pieces are useful or not. Just because, like I've always said, I don't prioritize damage a lot in my gear sets. That's just not the kind of player I've been. Playing Samurai has been kind of eye opening because it's been a different experience for me, and I'm starting to ask these questions and explore these different avenues and things like that. But it's interesting how all the different pieces of gear can change what you're doing.
Yeah. And a lot of the times, weapon skill damage plus equipment applies to the first hit of a physical based weapon skill typically. So that's why also with Savage Blade, with it having the FTP modifier only applied to the first hit as well, it's usually good to basically maximize that first hit of your weapon skill and also include weapon skill damage with it. Well, with resolution, the FTP modifiers are lower. So you can equip those Phodia pieces. So having the Phodia neck and the waist may help boost those modifiers for across all the hits, which is more beneficial than potentially using weapon skill damage, which would only help the first hit of a weapon of resolution. So you may also want to think about multi-attack equipment because the multi-attack can proc up to making your weapon skill an 8-hit weapon skill instead of, in resolution's case, a 5-hit weapon skill. So that's more potential chances to have additional damage with the same modifiers applied as well.
Yeah, that's kind of what people were looking at with Howling Fist with a lot of that testing is that double attack and multi attack is actually better for it because it can get so many extra hits on it. And it's an FTP replicating, so while you're doing all the extra hits, it's also replicating the FTP across that entire weapon skill. And there's also weapon skills that cap at how many hits they can have, so in that case, multi attack is not useful there.
Hmm. But it's definitely things to think about for different people. I know weapon skills are one of the more complicated things in this game, especially when you start getting to ranged weapon skills. Those ones are so far off the wall on because we're still testing if job abilities like triple shot and double shot actually do get applied to weapon skills, and if the gear that's also associated with those can have the same effect as the multi attack equipment. Because unlike multi attack with um, melee jobs, multi attack on range jobs doesn't actually apply unless you have those abilities active, which I think kind of sucks because I wish I could shoot like multiple arrows at once if I have the equipment on and I don't have triple shot active. But sadly, it isn't the case for ranged classes.
Yeah, so a lot of what you're doing here and the big kind of theory that we're trying to get in is when you're building a set of gear, it has to have a purpose. Um, I do like to check people. I like to look at other people's gear just because I like to figure out what they're thinking about. Or I look at it and I'm like, what in the world are you trying to do with this gear set? Those are usually the two responses to me looking at somebody's gear, and I just enjoy thinking of like looking at people's gear and seeing what they were thinking when they made this gear set. So when you're making these gear sets, stop and actually like think, okay, what in the world am I really trying to do with this gear set as I'm making it?
I would say sometimes when looking up different guides and you see them talking about certain things in regards to a particular job, sometimes you can look up just that type of thing in BGWiki and there will be a separate guide that goes into more details about that particular thing. Like we were talking about TP sets earlier in regards to haste, dual wield, and magic haste. And there is a separate thing that you can actually look up about attack delay in regards to certain things that can help you out in regards to building your set. There is a lot more information in that section that may not be in particular job guides.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we haven't really covered a lot of is nuking builds. And with the introduction of Odyssey and all these other things, there's multiple ways to build a nuking build now. Like you're talking, do I want to be magic burst heavy? Do I want to? Do I know I'm magic bursting? Do I know that? Like in situations with Ongo, do I need to break a specific D int where my int needs to be this much higher than the mobs and stuff like that? Do I need more magic accuracy? Am I already magic accuracy capped to where I can add more magic attack bonus? There's all these different things that go into it.
Yeah, and speaking of nuking, it's also just like curing, it has those two tiers as well too, so finding the balance for magic burst damage 1 versus magic burst damage 2, and like you were saying, on some of those higher level mobs you may have to sacrifice magic burst damage in order to have those consistent numbers with not getting resisted, or making sure you have your intelligence up high enough that it doesn't get resisted in regards to intelligence based for d-int modifiers.
Yeah, a lot of it goes back to consistency, and that's what kind of wins these fights and wins all the different especially in Odyssey, is just staying consistent damage and making sure you're optimizing every chance you get. And you have to stay consistent. You can't drop damage whether you die, whatever happens that makes you drop damage, you've got to be able to stay that consistent damage.
What's kind of nice is they've kind of recently, not too recently, added higher apex monsters to almost the same level as these bosses that are in Odyssey. So if you need something to kind of test on to try to get a better idea of how well your sets may apply to some of these stronger monsters, you can go after these higher level apex monsters in either of the promies. So you got Dem, Mia, and Hala that have kind of a middle tier apex mobs, and then you have the highest tier apex mobs in Nizal Isle.
Yeah, those gears are no joke.
Yeah, I tried recently going out there on Warrior just to check my accuracy builds, and uh was really surprised at how much I was missing on those particular mobs. And it really made me go back to the drawing board and go, okay, maybe I need to fix this or tweak it a little bit more to have additional accuracy, because the current accuracy and high accuracy set that I have just aren't cutting it. What do I need to do to still have a consistent damage output without sacrificing to put all this accuracy in?
And a lot of it is a lot of the higher end content now, we've kind of realized you almost have to rely on having buffs. You have to make sure your parties are built right. So a lot of your sets, you should be able to definitely rely on the fact that you have these things. You have the accuracy from Honor March. You have a Madrigal if you need it. You have food. You have all these things that you just assume that you're going to have. And yes, you can have that extra high accuracy set for really low buff situations, but that should be an emergency button, not so much what you fall back on.
For sure. But there's also things like with red mages playing Frazzle and Distract. I know even just from the tier 2 to tier 3 of those spells, they are calculated actually differently as well too, which is kind of interesting. So you'll definitely want to look at even just the spells that you're casting. Do they have a modifier that helps enhance them, or a specific skill that enhances them as well?
Yeah, it's also talking to your party members. If you have a geomancer, saying, hey, is there any way that we can do this bubble? And yeah, it's usually you don't want to try to like make somebody change for the entire party. If you're having the problem, you should adjust for your party. But if everybody's having a certain problem and it will help the group entirely, then it's completely normal to say, hey, can we switch the bubble? Can we make sure Frazzle is on this? Can we make sure Distract is on this? Things like that. Because these are things that can help you. It's just talking to your group. It's talking to the people you're working with and saying, hey, can we get this? Can we do this differently? This set I have is going to be optimized under these circumstances. Can we try this? Things like that. So communication with the people around you of what you're trying to do is really important.
Yeah, not only that, but if maybe you get into a pickup group and you notice there's somebody on a job that you play, but you're not necessarily playing it in that content, and they're doing really well, you can always ask them questions and see if they're willing to help you understand what they're doing, versus what you already have in your equipment. Maybe there's something that you can change. Maybe they are doing, more weapon skill damage on a particular weapon skill, or more multi attack, or there's a particular mage that just is getting consistent nukes over what you're using on your particular mage job. I mean, the community is all here in order to try to help benefit each other. I know there are some people that are not as willing to help people out, which is kind of a bummer. But there's nothing wrong with asking to see if they'd be willing to assist you and answer questions. I know I've gone out and asked a couple people, "Hey, I've noticed you started using this. Why do you use this over this particular thing?" And I've actually gotten a nice response from people willing to actually help me get a better understanding of why they're doing a certain thing they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the game is about being a community, helping people. That's what it's always been like since really the beginning of time of the game. So there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to talk to each other and don't ask the question of, hey, can you send me your set because I just want to copy it. Ask specific questions like, hey, can I see what you're using because I'm noticing this. Some people like are just looking for the cookie cutter builds and oh, I just want to copy your gear set and not actually think of anything. But when you sit there and ask a specific question of like, hey, I noticed this was happening. I noticed you were able to land this spell. I was struggling with it. Can I see your set? Different things like that. And I think people will respond a little bit stronger in these situations.
Yeah, I know even just a conversation between you and I, Carm, when we were talking about regal gauntlets for Paladin and how they could be more beneficially used on Paladin because of the fact that they not only have that enhancing magic duration plus, but they have spell interruption rate on them as well too, which allows you to be able to change your sets around.
Yeah, and the massive HP on them. Like the massive HP on Regal Gauntlets with the ability to be in your spell interrupt set and not yo-yo around as much with your HP. It's pretty cool. I mean, a lot of paladins try to make sure in their builds that they're staying at that 3k HP mark, and that's usually like the kind of go-to. Like if you're staying at 3k and you're not yo-yoing up and down, then you're doing pretty well with what you got, unless you're cure cheating, which is another way to optimize your gear sets, in where you optimize the fast cast, drop yourself into a lower HP, and then finish with a cure. And even though you didn't take any damage, you're still healing for about that 800 level cure, and you're gaining the enmity off of it. So you have another hate tool just by utilizing the gear sets that you're using.
Yeah, and speaking of yo-yoing, you can also use that same method for mages in regards to their MP pools because you can actually see a yo-yoing effect where you have maybe full MP and then you cast a spell and some gear doesn't have the same MP output on it. So it drops your MP significantly to where you're dropping maybe to 75% of your maximum MP pool. So that's something that mages can also think about. It's not more in the forthcoming of a thought process, but it is something to consider so that way you have more MP to utilize for different things on your particular job.
Yeah, MP management is, I mean, it's really important, obviously. If you don't have MP, you can't really do your job. So it's going through and looking at all these sets, trying to figure out, okay, am I really optimizing this? Is this piece doing anything for me? Because every piece you're wearing should have some purpose. If you're just putting on a piece to put it on, then it probably doesn't make sense. Usually if you put on a piece, and if I don't have anything that can help what I'm doing, I'll put on DT, I'll put on magic evasion, I'll put on uh, something along the lines of, okay, I need some HP. Every piece you're wearing should have a purpose. It should be doing something to amplify this set or to make the transition into this set and out of this set smoother.
Most definitely. And I mean, there's even other pieces that DDs can kind of think about as well too, where it'll use their MP pool to either have a weapon that attacks more frequently, but there's also a newer piece from Odyssey called the Sherry Earring, which reduces the amount of enmity that you have per swing based off of the amount of MP that it takes as well too. So if you're worried about pulling hate off of a tank, that's something that you could think about incorporating into your set during certain times. I know Dark Knight's one of those jobs that it does have access to the Sherry Earring, but they also utilize their MP pool a lot. And if they're not using a scythe and they're using a greatsword in order to do torque levers, that's something you can kind of manipulate in your builds depending on what you're doing.
Yeah, and a lot of it is, once again, talking with your party and saying, hey, I'm using this specific piece. Can I get refresh? This is the reason I'm asking for this. And it's explaining, and it's making sure people understand that you're not just asking for refresh to be a pain in the rear end. You're asking for refresh because you're using a piece of gear to optimize your DPS or to optimize your survival in this point. It's understanding why you're using the gear, when you're using the gear. Also, I mean, there's the Vim torque. With that HP per tick, if you know you're going to have region 5 and you know you're not going to be in a lot of danger, then you've got that option as well, but you have to understand why you're using it. Not just because somebody said it was the best way to optimize your DPS, but because of the fact that you have the ability to do so and you know why you're using it.
Yeah, for sure. And you guys can always reach out in the comments below as well too if you're coming onto the YouTube page and ask questions on there as well too. If we may not have the answer, we might be able to point you over to either a particular player that's willing to assist with questions or in regards to particular guides that may be available for players that'll better explain certain situations as well too.
Yeah, and once again, like I've said multiple times on this podcast, we're not, or at least I'm definitely not. I'm not going to speak for Claire,
Oh,
but
no, no, no.
I am definitely not the know-it-all, like 100% right about everything I'm talking about, and I know everything about this game, and everything I say is just pure gold, and it's just not that way. There are probably a lot of things I don't understand about this game. There's probably a lot of things I understand incorrectly about this game because there just is so much going on. It's how you figure it out, it's how you apply it, it's how you use it, and how you really take steps in the direction to see better things come out of your gear sets.
Yeah, that's what's actually been really nice to see in our Discord lately is people have been asking questions and just seeing the conversations between people that do have more knowledge than Carm and I might have on on a particular thing. Because I know I don't know all 22 jobs. I play maybe 8 of them on my character alone. And yeah, I play some on Ava as well too, but I don't ask me questions about most of Ava's jobs. I don't know them very well comparatively to the ones I play on Claire. But being able to have a place that you can actually ask these questions and people that are like, hey, yeah, I know what they're talking about. I know where I can help them or explain it in an easier way to where they can understand it as well too. Is it's just really nice to see.
Oh yeah, I mean, our Discord has really become a lot of the whole thing that we were talking about. It's people helping people. It's not just a few people doing a Q&A and ask me whatever, or AMAs, or whatever the heck it is. It's the entire community coming together to help each other out and just really think about the game in a different way, and it's been fun.
And if you want some weird oddball thing, you can always ask Murr. He usually has some sort of thing that's going crazy on in the week. But he's a great person to try to think of ideas outside of the box and strategies outside of the box. It's like I said in the beginning, it's a really interesting to try to get into his mindset and just understand what he's trying to do. And it has come to a lot of beneficial things in regards to things Carm and I do with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just I'll pick his brain all the time, and it doesn't mean that I do, like 100%. I'm like, okay, Merce said this works. This is definitely the way it should be. No, that's not. That's the way it works for Mer, not the way it works for me. But I can try it. I can go out and be like, okay, does this actually work for me, or does it not? It's just about how you feel comfortable playing the game. And I know that, like I said, I prioritize DT way more than a lot of people do. So there's that as well.
Claire keeps dying. Claire keeps dying. I can hear Carm yelling at me at every run every time I die. Why aren't you in a hybrid set? My cores don't have hybrid sets. They have either it's on or it's
Corsairs.
off.
Oh, Corsairs.
It's very hard to build a
Yeah.
hybrid set. I know it's your favorite
Corsairs
class. I'm trying to
so
figure one
weird.
out.
It's so weird. It feels so different to be in like a full TP build and then go to like trying to build a hybrid set. You're just like, ugh.
Your best hybrid pieces are malignants, and that still feels really weird to do.
Yeah, Malignance is great on a lot of jobs, and it's great on core for what it does, but it just doesn't keep up for the things you really need it to do. I really like. I'm glad they got the Odyssey set, but at the same time, I kind of wish they would have gotten more. I know they're not supposed to be DD focused or melee focused and whatnot, but sometimes I kind of wish they would.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of happy about the set. Like at first I looked at it and I was like, why? And then I remembered my roots of Corsair and I was like, oh, of course, they're a ranged class. that was primarily built for ranging. Like, it makes sense. They've kind of only gotten more into the frontline DD melee aspect in more recent years, which is kind of a nice that you have both options with that job, but it does limit some of the gear that it gains access to in order to be a frontline position type DD class.
Yeah,
And
it's such a. I don't want to say that all of its gear is made of paper, but in in some aspects, a lot of it is kind of like, really? Are you sure about this? Yeah.
just it's okay, Carm. It's okay. Well, I will try not to explode as much on my core.
I don't know if it's okay. And like we were talking about, a lot of it is just the way the job is. It's just not as hardy as the other jobs, in my personal opinion, and that's my personal opinion. So it could
But
be wrong.
we do like seeing people try different things, go out and test different things, and just find kind of your own way to play your jobs. I mean, there's just like we've mentioned before, there really isn't a true best in slot piece. While there are some really good pieces, it may not necessarily be best in slot for your current job at the current moment, but maybe further down the line, it'll work its way in there.
Yeah, and this also kind of goes back to the conversation with Rima weapons when you talk about our 1 to 119 guide of when and when not to go for Rimas and things like that. Don't just build a Rima because you think you think you're already ready to just do whatever and you think it's going to be the kill all. Like, you have to build a gear set around that Rima. You have to understand what you're doing and have the proper tools to utilize it correctly, because every Rima does something. Like, they all have their purpose. They all have a reason to exist. I mean, I guess there's a couple that may not really have a good reason to exist, but most of them have a specific background to where, okay, this is what you're supposed to do with this weapon, but you need to be able to do this build around it. This is how this has to make sense. Like, a lot of the Empyreans with utilizing the white damage and things like that, you have to be able to build a set around utilizing that white damage, or you're kind of doing the weapon not justice.
Yeah, I have that kind of worked into my gear swaps for warrior. I mean, people that know me, I built all the great axes for my warrior. And when I get aftermaths up for either of them, they all have different things that I utilize. Like you were saying with Empyrean weapon, it's more based off of doing the white damage. And I have more of a crit based skill or crit damage or multi attack damage for my Empyrean weapon, just so that way I can dish out higher numbers while my Ukon's aftermath is up. But then if I have Conqueror on, it gains occasionally attacks twice or thrice, which is a different calculation altogether than it is with double attack, triple attack, and quadruple attack. So I do usually reel in less multi attack and go for a higher damage output with that, even with warrior, which is a highly double attack based job. Because of the calculation with conqueror and the aftermath, it is something to think about, switching it up with. So it is more of a higher store TP build, so I have a less of a hit build when using it. And then bravura, you gain damage taken minus, and we were talking about that earlier, thinking about different DT builds. And so when that aftermath is up, I have to completely change what DT set I use, and it gives me more options in regards to even just a hybrid set as well too, because of its aftermath. So looking at what each provides, you can really tailor your sets. I know I'm working on Farsha, which is going to have even a completely different set than my Ukon has. So again, just looking in and figuring out your different builds with what weapons you're using. And like you mentioned before about waiting to work on Arima to really understand the job, it's so true. I mean, I knew Nirvana summoners. I bring this example up a lot because it hits really hard, like thinking about it. Knowing Nirvana summoners, getting out damaged by non-Nirvana summoners because that's the first thing they went for. They're like, "Oh, I see these shouts on Asura where they're looking for Nirvana summoners to do Astral Flow, Astral Conduit. I can get in that party if I make a Nirvana." And then they get into those parties and then they get ripped apart because the parse comes out, because there's usually somebody running a parse somewhere in a pickup group. Don't know why, but they usually this is why. And then they'll just rip this person apart because they're like, your damage was so much lower than this person that's using a non mythic weapon and just completely beat you out. And then you feel terrible that you made this mythic weapon on this particular job. So then you are going to go retire the job. And it's like, no, don't let people discourage you. Learn the job, figuring out what can help build up. And since you've already made the mythic, just keep working on utilizing it and figuring out what gear works best for it. But for those people that haven't made them, they're able to learn their jobs at a, I wouldn't say at a better rate, but they're able to really figure out what gear works with their particular stuff that they have to get those better damage outputs. So once they do get those remas, they have just a significant increase just from what they've already know and have utilized.
Yeah, a lot of the thing I go to with paladins is a lot of people just get Burt Gang and sit. Like, okay, I've got Burt Gang, that's all I need. And then they get Ochain and they're like, okay, I've got these two, that's all I need. But every Rima on Paladin really has its own use. Excalibur in situations where you just need block rate, and when you're blocking, you're taking 0, that it adds that extra bit of block rate. It has the aftermath with the region and the refresh on it. Knights of the Round is fusion. Like, there's all these different things that go into Excalibur to make it really, really useful. And people are like, well, I can't spam atonement with it, and it isn't Burt Gang, so. And a lot of times you don't need that extra PDT that comes from Burt Gang. When you do need it, it comes in handy, and there's no reason to not use Burt Gang. I use my Burt Gang all the time, but that doesn't mean that it's the only weapon I have. I still have the Excalibur, I still have Aegis, I still have Ochain, I still have Prewin, even though it's not a Rima. It's still a really fantastic shield. So you've got all these options to you, and you can build sets around each one of them. Like I said, you can sit there with all the master levels that have come in and all the different changes to where we are in gear quality. You can start doing things with Aegis where you're able to at least get a decent block rate on it, and you can throw in things like counter. You can throw in things like uh, MDT or whatever you need to throw in to utilize that weapon in a better mode. And it's like they all have this purpose to them.
Yeah, I remember hearing you building the counter build for your paladin at one point. I was like, why would you build a counter build for paladin if you need to make sure that you have everything under control, or, make sure you're not taking so much damage? And when you actually explained to me why you were doing it, it was like, oh, I guess I never really thought about using that utility in regards to maybe fighting something one on one.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another way to mitigate damage. When you're thinking about the different ways that you're going into a fight, you can mitigate damage in so many different ways. There's parrying skill, there's countering, there's guarding, there's blocking. There's all these different ways of doing things, and when you add in different levels of sub jobs and different changes and different pieces of gear that give you different ways of doing things, all of a sudden you're just raising all the different ways you have to mitigate damage. So, I mean, you're looking at a paladin with a counter build. You've already got, if you're blocking, you're taking 0. You're DT capped, so you're taking 0. But now you've also got a way to counter where you're also taking 0, but now you're adding damage
Oh,
and you're
and
mitigating these things.
Speaking of mitigation, there's also something that we forgot to talk about, which was subtle blow sets as well too. Just being
Oh.
able to mitigate the amount of TP that you're actually feeding maybe a NM in Odyssey, so that way it doesn't get certain TP moves off. And that's something I've been actually talking to you about, was potentially getting a SU5 weapon in order to get subtle blow 2, so that way I can be cap or closer to the overall subtle blow cap, because I have certain jobs that have easier accessibility to subtle blow 1 but may not be as able to get subtle blow 2 as easily, to get closer to that cap with having the two abilities.
Yeah, I mean, there are probably all kinds of different sets that we haven't talked about. But the main topic that we want to address, and I really want to thank the person that brought up this idea for us to talk about. And I know a couple people have said something about different gear sets and things like that. So thank you to the people that have stepped up and said, "Hey, can you guys talk about this?" But the main point that we want to get across here is just when you're building a set, make it make sense. Make everything that you're doing in this set, you hit one goal, you knock that off your checklist. Okay, then you figure out your next thing and your next thing and your next thing. And all of a sudden, boom, you've got a great gear set that's doing something. And a lot of it is based on the fight you're doing. Maybe you went and did a low buff thing and you're like, holy crap, I actually need to use O-Chain here because I'm not going to be haste cap to be able to utilize reprisal. I have to cap block rate, but the only way I can do it is not having, I can't full-time reprisal, so I need to use O-Chain. Things like that. You're thinking about the fight that you're in. You're building a set to best utilize that fight. I mean, speaking of Lilith sets, like, I have a set specifically for that fight just because it reduces the knockback from Lilith. Do I use it for any other content in the game? No, it's just for Lilith, but these are the things that you can do with utilizing a gear set is make every bit of content easier because you're optimizing for that content.
Definitely, for sure. Even just reading some of the content notes in regards to the particular thing that you're going into, just to give you an idea of, oh, I'm going to go and utilize this job that I have in order to do this content. Well, maybe I need to see if there's something that I particular need. I mean, like with Odyssey, you lose all sub jobs. So you may need to tweak your set in regards to the fact that you've lost your sub job in order to have a higher either DPS output or more efficiency on mage jobs.
Yeah, so just take some time, look into what you're doing. There is no one set that is the end all be all in this game. There just isn't. There's so many different ideas, so many different pieces of gear you can throw in, and so many different options that you can do with the stuff that you have. And you may not think you have all the most top tier gear in the world, but it's understanding the gear that you have and utilizing it in the best way possible. Because I mean, I've seen people, like you said, without our 25 Nyamis and without all the best augmented gear in the game, outparse people that do have it just because they understand the gear that they have currently and are utilizing it in the best way possible, and the other people are just trying to cookie cutter.
Most definitely. It is a common thing that we typically see, which is why it's been nice seeing this LS, because they have, again, reminded us that while people don't necessarily follow a particular guide, can show that they can go with what gear they have and still produce the same numbers, if not better numbers on occasion, than people that have followed those cookie cutter strategies on either the forums, or on BG Wiki, or on Auction House if you're looking on the forums on there too.
Yeah, and a lot of people that are out there buying content and basically buying their way through this game, they're not picking up these key things of this is what this piece actually does. They just looked at a guide, it said this piece is really good, and then they're going to get it. But they don't understand how it fits in with the rest of what they do have. So they're putting on these pieces, but then they're not complementing it with the other pieces around it.
That is kind of a sad thing because we see it a lot on Asura with all the shouts and everything. I mean, I have shouts turned off by this point because it is just a constant thing. But I wish people would go out and even if you tried soloing something just to see what your job can do or see how your gear is actually being worked into these particular abilities or spells or um, even just enhancements to your job traits as well too can really make a difference when building your sets.
Yeah, and you're not going to understand the potential of a set or how a set works until you go out and actually play the game. So if you're just buying the content, you're not going to understand how this piece you're getting is actually working. Because you're going to go into something and be like, oh, okay, well, this person used this on this content, but you could be doing something completely different where that piece of gear doesn't really help. And all of a sudden, you're putting yourself in a situation where you will no longer understand what just happened because all you know is you wanted that piece and now it doesn't work for this content. So you have to go, okay, well, I hope somebody put out a guide that says, uh, this is what I used for this fight.
But hopefully everybody gets kind of just even some insight on things that they can look at, places they can go and search the content in regards to getting a better understanding, or just even some key information to be like, oh, this spell needs primarily enfeebling magic skill or needs magic accuracy, or like we were saying before, um, different job abilities, like even with warrior extending your war cry out with a specific piece in order to enhance that. So just going in, doing some research on your own, as well as testing in the game to really just solidify your understanding of that particular thing and being like, okay, I may not have this piece that this particular person says that they use, but I have this piece that's equivalent to it. And just going out and enjoying playing the jobs that you've leveled up and trying it within content. I know Karm takes his red mage out and tries to tank Fu against a ranger and a corsair, which
Uh,
which was an interesting bit. I mean, we still won, but was a different experience to try out a job that may not necessarily fit a mold in regards to what it can do. I mean, we've seen people in the past go and solo gods on Red Mage, and it worked out really well for them because they were trying something different than what the standard cookie cutter was saying too. So look into what you want your job to do, what you want it to do for a particular content, and just enjoy what you're doing and understanding and learning more in this game, especially with new content coming out here in the future.
yeah, and you're also going to get more of a fun experience out of the game when you're sitting there making these sets and you're going out and seeing them work. I don't find anything more fun than just going out and playing with sets and seeing them do what I wanted them to do. Like when I have a bunch of mobs on me in Odyssey, or I have a bunch of mobs in Omen, and I counter like 82 times in a row, and all I see is just complete negation. It's hilarious to me. It's awesome. It's exactly what I wanted the set to do. It's exactly how I played it out in my head. And I'm still taking zeros and I'm just adding damage. Like it's just the smallest utilization and the smallest addition to it, but it's something I'm doing by enhancing my own gear and I'm enhancing everybody else's experience as well.
Hey, Carm,
Yes.
are you taking these enhancements to the next level?
Ah, take your gear sets to the next level.
It's somehow got to be in our podcast episodes every time in somewhere.
Uh, okay, well, in that case, you have to say it.
To what? Just taking the
Nope.
gear?
Oh, nope, nope. You got to say it.
I don't even know what I'm saying now.
You have to say it's a pot of waddle.
That has nothing to do with the next level.
No, it has everything to do with my. It's the next level of my enjoyment.
Oh, okay. So me saying it's a pot of waddle is for your enjoyment.
Yes, I quite enjoy it. But
Just like
really,
how
guys, go out and like make some weird friends like this. But if you want to come in our Discord and talk about this stuff with us, we're more than welcome. We enjoy talking about the game. That's the only reason we ever made this podcast, was just to talk about the game, and it's turned into a chance to talk with the community about the game and build this link shell and make these new friends and enjoy the game on a different level, even if it's not something that we genuinely need. I mean, we're not coming out with a bunch of new gear by any means. We're doing content that we have a lot of the stuff from, but we're being a part of the community. We're talking about the game, and it's not because we went out and yelled. It's not because we're murking stuff and we're making a bunch of gil off of people and that's the way we're trying to do things. It's just because we're playing the game. We found people that want to actually play the game the way it's supposed to be played, and we're building this community that is actually understanding the way the game is supposed to be played and what is happening.
Yeah, and I've been enjoying the community aspects of seeing what you guys have been saying on our YouTube page, but also for those people that have came and checked us out over on twitch.tv/nextlevelpc. I'm going to greatly apologize for the past couple of streams where my internet has been a little bit bad and has been laggy as all shit, but it's been nice to still have conversations with people while even doing link shell content or just messing around in the game. And I know I've gotten into some conversations with people in regards to gear sets or why I'm using a certain build on a particular job, and just having those in-depth conversations. Like, it's really nice being able to interact with the community, not only in the game or in our Discord, but also outside it, like again, I said on YouTube and on Twitch as well.
So at the end of the day, this is an MMO. Like you just that's what it is. We're supposed to play as a community. Yes, there's a bunch of 6-person content. Yes, there's a bunch of 6-boxers running around that are doing whatever. But at the end of the day, we are supposed to play as a group. There's no like 40-man raids or anything like that. There's no really up to date 18-man content, but it's about enjoying the game as a group and sharing these experiences with the people around you.
So hopefully we get to see you guys more often as well too, whether it's in the game, on the Discord, or through our other platforms. And just come and hang out with us, talk to us, regardless if it's in a positive or negative manner. We just want to hear what you guys have to say, and just being able to have conversations in regards to the game and in regards to the community as well too. Like, come and hang out with us. And hopefully we get to see you guys all next time in the next episode, or again on twitch.tv/nextlevelpc. Thank you guys all for hanging out with us and have a wonderful time. Bye bye.
Have a good one.